Tony Martignetti nonprofit radio coverage of 18NTC, Nonprofit Technology Conference in New Orleans. This interview is sponsored by Network for Good, easy-to-use donor management and fundraising software for nonprofits. My guests are Anna Rhodes and Brenna Holmes. Anna is Deputy Director of Analytics at Chapman, Cubine Hussey, and Brenna Holmes is Vice President of Digital at CCAH. Ladies, welcome.
Thank you.
Glad to have you both.
Yeah.
Have you done your session already?
We did. We just finished it.
Just finished. Oh,
Yes.
You're coming off it. All right.
Yeah.
Coming off the high.
Exactly.
And the bar is open now.
Life is
The
good.
cash bar is open. Yes. Perfect. Perfect timing. Your topic was, but are we making progress establishing and using KPIs? Okay. We may as well start with it just to make sure that everybody understands that a KPI is a, all right, why don't you say it in unison together?
A key performance indicator.
Beautiful. You see that velvety voice? That's wonderful. Okay. I think that's pretty well understood. But let's just make sure. Okay. Why are these things so important? Let's start with Anna.
Because it is so hard to keep everyone within a nonprofit working towards the same goal instead of looking at all of their different measurements. So having a way to agree on what success really looks like can actually end up making you be more successful in the end, because then you're all working towards the same goals.
Okay, so there's part of this topic is organizational buy-in.
Yes.
Or, well, not organization, yes. Whatever, however you
Cohesion.
define
Focus.
a bunch of people need to agree.
Yes.
So we'll call that buy-in. Okay. And I also see another part of this is data overload. I mean, there's just so much available.
Right.
We need to focus on Brenna on what's the most important stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. And the main thing, them clearing up the misnomer that not all metrics are KPIs, right? So everybody does have to agree on what are we trying to track? Why are we tracking it? Because how does that help us meet our strategic objectives and our end goals, right? So once you have the buy-in on all those goals, then you're able to dig down deeper and develop what are those specific metrics that will help us meet these KPIs that we can then measure against those strategic objectives to ensure that we do have success and that we are tracking over time.
Okay, very good. That's a great overview. Thank you. All right, so should we start with our organizational goals?
Yes.
Because that's what we're measuring against, as you were just saying. Okay.
Exactly.
So now we got to get. Okay, so this all obviously should flow from our mission, right? We're going to go back to that 14-year-old voice, that root reason that we exist, our mission statement.
Yes.
Okay. From that we have goals. Now, okay, I'm going to assume that everybody buys into the mission, otherwise they wouldn't be working there.
Hopefully, yeah.
But now, when we get to the goal stage, people could start falling out. That's where the disagreement. It's not too far from mission to goal.
Right.
But we could start losing people. What do we do? Go ahead, Brenna. Keep
Sure.
going.
Yeah.
Get us started.
So we like to focus it on the building kind of SMART goals, right? So what do we need to do departmentally, department by department, to help us achieve our mission? And really honing it in to really no more than 2, 3. Anna went up to 5 in our session. I was like, oh, that's a lot. But 2, 3 things that we all can agree on as a group, that these are priorities, these are important goals. And yes, there's other things that are important, but if we let ourselves go down the rabbit hole of just listing everything that's important, nothing's no longer important.
Which is what you were starting with. You were referring to earlier with the data overload, and it's especially easy because digital metrics can be so different than offline metrics. To instead have the
I'm actually moving it away a little bit.
Oh, okay.
Okay, don't worry.
It can actually be easy to have the metrics create new divisions within just the development department divisions that didn't even exist before. But
now the data is causing problems
Right.
rather than solving.
Right.
Yeah.
So as long as you're looking at 20 things in Google Analytics and through the Facebook manager over here, and then a completely different set of metrics for direct mail, you're not even working towards the same goals within the development department. So that's part of why it's so important to start at the goal side of things rather than at the measurement side of things, so that the measurements always are serving the goals.
Supporting those goals, right. Okay. I imagine we need top-down this has got to come from leadership. The goal agreement. We're still in the goal agreement stage.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be driven from above and accepted.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be driven from above, but
Right,
definitely you
actually, I was thinking, as I was saying it, I was thinking it could be bottom up.
It
It could be, but the leadership has to be on
in
board.
agreement.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. For sure. All right. Yeah. All right. So we agree on our goals now. Now we're moving to our KPIs. How do we know what that's measurable belongs at the top within these goals that we've all agreed on?
Well, and even before you get to what are the KPIs, we need to develop strategic objectives for each goal.
Okay.
Because the goals tend to be a little bit umbrella.
Right. They're vague and they're aspirational.
Exactly. Like we used Greenpeace, one of our clients in our session today, partnered with us, and one of their goals is defending democracy.
Okay.
Well, that's big, right? And existential and long, and so then we developed strategic objectives that will help them measure against whether or not they're being successful in defending democracy. You want to?
So what are some of them that they chose?
So we work through them from...
Where's Greenpeace? How come they're not here?
I know, Zach's not here.
How are they not at this table? All right.
I know.
They're lost. Sorry, it's nonprofit radio. It's your life.
I know.
But we work through them from the department perspective. So what would it mean for the fundraising department to be supporting the organization goal of defend democracy? So it is easy for fundraisers to think that their job is always the same. It is always just raise lots of money, and then we're done. But there actually is more nuance in that. If we're trying to defend democracy, well, sadly, that isn't something that we're just doing today or for the next month. That's actually a long-term project, certainly at least through the Trump presidency. And given how Greenpeace defines this goal of actually reducing the amount of money in politics, I mean, that's going to take some time. So that means whatever funding that fundraising is supplying has to be sustainable. And it's the net that matters, not just the growth tomorrow. Okay, so that means now we've clarified the objective in the fundraising department. So that's the next stage. We've come up with the mission statement for the organization. We've turned that into a number of goals for the organization, the big dream things: defend democracy, stop global warming, all of these huge concepts. And then we've broken them down for how does my department contribute to that? Right. And only once you've done that can you decide, what am I going to measure? What's actually meaningful?
What do I need to measure?
Okay.
Right? So the strategic objective is growth in sustainable net revenue. Well, both sustainable and net are two measurable things. So then you can build your KPIs off of those keywords and actually decide on what are the metrics that we have to check. How do we agree on collecting that data so that everything has a flat measured baseline that we can then benchmark ourselves against periodically so that we're checking in on that growth side of the goal.
And when we're at this stage, is this just our department that's
currently
making these decisions? Okay, so we're not at the higher levels anymore. It's not necessary.
Correct.
We're at the department level.
But we're going to build back up. So we've gone down to the department level to figure out So, I mean, you're using your expertise. So you want your fundraisers figuring out how fundraising can best support the fundraising goal, right? You don't. I don't want a CFO deciding that.
Right.
But in the end, the CFO has to buy in on it. All of leadership does have to buy in. So once the various organizations have figured out their objectives and their KPIs, then you have to come back up a level and talk across departments and see how these objectives support each other and possibly adjust them is where we ended up with our Greenpeace example, is actually making slight objectives when the marketing department and the fundraising department saw the amount of overlap between their objectives and the tactics in specific that they were planning in order to get there.
And so that sounds like an aha moment.
Yeah.
That we have a lot more in common than we realized across marketing and fundraising. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. I don't know. Let me ask you. Where should we go next with this? Where should we go next with the discussion? Did you talk? Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I think we use marketing and fundraising as the example here because obviously the NTC audience is a lot of marketers and fundraisers.
Yeah.
But the same structure and the same necessity for KPIs is in all departments, right? Whether it's your program people who are actually implementing the services, or whether it's your public relations or media relations outreach people, like all of these departments have to go through this same process. And I think there will be a lot of those aha moments for organizations who are used to working in silos when they start thinking about the goals, right, actually being achievable strategic objectives that can be measured back against the mission and go from there.
Okay. What about digital fundraising KPIs?
Sure.
You talked some about that.
We did.
Yeah. Okay. Let's flesh that out. You want to start, Anna?
There are a lot of questions about digital fundraising KPIs because people immediately go to the measurements available in Google Analytics and which one of these should I use, as if the answer is the same for everyone.
Right.
So this just, as if conversion rate on your petitions should be a certain number for every single organization, and that's what defines success because we can show you how to set that up in Google Analytics. So that came up in our session, and it was another reminder to folks to go back to the beginning,
Right.
decide on your goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like in a lot of ways it's like the ultimate consultant answer is it depends, right? Because everything is individualized. If you're not taking the time to audit yourselves and personalize and get that organizational buy-in and that organizational priority list, then they don't really matter. Then they aren't KPIs. They're just metrics. Whether they are showing growth or loss or what, they're just vanity numbers at that point because they have no tie to the strategic objectives and the mission of the organization. Like we had one question in the session, which was great, and it was about supporter scoring. And I think that's been a really hot topic in the digital space.
Supporter scoring. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know what that is.
Okay, so it's taking basically qualitative pieces of information, whether that's behavioral traits or demographic things, and scoring it, putting a quantitative weight to that, to then build a model to show you these are my best people, my top 10 decile, or my bottom 10, and then also using it to find lookalike audiences and things like that out in the world. So, do you want to add to that?
You're doing this for different constituencies?
Correct.
Like donors, volunteers?
Exactly. Event attendees.
Service beneficiaries? Okay, so different constituencies.
Right.
And the problem is exactly the same problem that folks have with models in the direct marketing space, is that for non-technical users, they hear model and they're like, oh, obviously adjusts to my program. It's must have something to do with artificial intelligence. I hear all these things are great. These people are scored at the top, therefore they're the best for me. And then they're surprised when the results don't match that. But any model has to be based on what your actual goals are. So if you're using a response-based model and your goal is actually to increase high dollar donors, that model is not going to serve you. The people with the top score in that model are not necessarily going to be the high dollar donors. And so it was the same thing with the supporter scoring. It was a very good question. But it again starts from the data side of things rather than the goal side of things. We have all of this data. We have these scores saying these supporters are our best ones. We should contact them every chance that we get.
Our screening tells us this.
Right,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, and I think a lot of it stemmed for a lot of people, and for him in particular, asking the question that, like, which one should I buy, right? Which model is best? Which scoring? Which software should I purchase? It's like you actually have to do the internal looking in to find out what's important to you before you decide what to purchase.
Introspection.
Yes, that's the word.
And then demand that of the vendors, because it's true that all of these models can be adjusted when you are able to communicate what is actually valuable to your organization. Otherwise, you're going to get
screening. You mean in screening?
Yes.
Yeah, that's not commonly known.
No.
I think most orgs say they just take the algorithms as they're provided
off the shelf.
and everybody gets the same mix.
Right.
Yeah.
Not
and
true,
that's
true.
That's not leveraging it to its utmost.
Yeah. Oh, that's a very important point. I think people are just taking it and they figure, well, there's a half a dozen vendors, so they each have different proprietary algorithms, and we have to pick one.
Right.
As is. Not so.
And not so.
No, you can negotiate that?
Oh, yes.
Oh, look, I got a chorus. Yeah, awesome. Just like the KPIs.
Yes,
I started you off. Yeah,
that's very important.
That's two songs together. Okay.
Ask for what you need.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter how big the screening. It doesn't matter whether it's Martin Lundy or Blackbaud or
No,
or anybody else?
it is going to affect the pricing, but asking the question, it does not affect the pricing. So always ask the question of these are the things that are important to us.
Yeah.
What would that mean for the price that you would offer on the model that you built that incorporates these things that are important to us?
Right.
So find that out from a few different vendors.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would say a good partner vendor is going to ask those questions of you. I mean, the best ones will, right?
I don't
know.
But
they don't. No, well, because they do try and everybody tries to have an off-the-shelf product that's going to be successful for the majority of users. But really the ones that are caring about donor-centric communication and really caring about long-term relationships with the nonprofits that they partner with should be asking those questions, because it is about building that custom model based on the weights and measures that are important to each individual organization.
Yeah, I know.
And each individual program or department in the organization.
Okay. In my experience, that's
it's not the case.
Purely aspirational and not reality.
I'm an optimist.
Okay. Yeah. There's optimism, and then there's naivete. No, I'm not saying you're naive. No, but I just haven't experienced it.
I know.
Now, I work in planned giving fundraising, so I'm not, I don't have all the conversations with potential screening vendors, but I just have never heard this, that you can negotiate and tweak the tweaking of the algorithm for you. I have never heard this.
Well, I've always, I say whether it's your own professional development and like negotiating raises or what, but if you don't ask, you don't get.
Everything's negotiable.
Everything's negotiable. Yeah.
I didn't think Martin Lundy was negotiable.
Yeah.
Okay.
And speaking of an analyst, there's nothing that I like better than being told exactly what your goals are so that I can build something that is really going to be successful.
Right.
Yeah. That's the best thing.
I don't come to Anna and say, show me these numbers, right? I come to Anna and say, I'm trying to figure out this about these donors. I'm trying to figure out the answer to this question. And then she comes back to me with the metrics that solve for X better than actually just telling me X.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else? We still have a good number of minutes together left. What else? Maybe other questions that got asked, or other things that came out of that were in your session that we haven't talked about yet? What else is there?
Well, one question that I got was, what software solves this? I'm paraphrasing,
Okay.
but basically it was, what do I buy that will make this?
What the KPI process?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, are there tech solutions for that?
No.
No, I mean we haven't talked about that at all.
No,
Yeah.
because they don't
Okay.
exist. But
Okay.
everybody just wants that easy answer,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Nobody likes introspection.
And there are tons and tons of software programs that can display your KPIs.
Right.
So if you're looking for a data visualization
A
solution,
dashboard, right?
a dashboard product, there's tons and tons of them out there. And what I told this person was that if your issue is that you don't have the staff to learn new software and you don't have the budget to buy something that isn't going to solve all of your problems, then don't buy anything.
Don't buy anything. Yeah.
Put your KPIs in Excel, put them in a Word doc if you have to. And it really is the process and the conversations and having the organization-wide agreement that makes this powerful. Not, I'll create some great visualizations for you, but I can create plenty of great visualizations using meaningless data.
Yeah. Some of this discussion reminds me of strategic planning discussions too.
Yep.
I mean, you're getting organizational buy-in.
Yep.
We're all agreeing on common goals and the measures toward those goals.
Yeah.
I mean, those goals inform the future direction of the organization. So there's overlap between this and a strategic planning process. Yeah.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of the draw when Anna came up with this session idea. I thought it would be.
Oh, she roped you in. Then.
Well, no,
Yeah.
I basically solicited her, but then
Oh,
she came
okay.
up with the idea.
Because NTC doesn't like solo. So I mean,
Well, no.
no. Okay.
No, but I'm the one that speaks at these things all the time, and I was like, Anna, your
Oh,
turn,
oh,
come
okay.
on.
Okay, it's the other way around.
But it was her idea. The session was great, and I just fell in love with it because it's not just about numbers, right? And that's what people think
Yeah, no,
of.
there's all this important questioning
Exactly.
and agreement.
It really is about the change, like even change management, strategic planning, like
Yeah,
all of those
organizational
things.
introspection.
Exactly.
Right,
And
right.
that's, I think, is lost on a lot of people, especially at nonprofits where everybody's wearing a lot of hats. Everybody is doing multiple jobs and just trying to get the next thing done on the list, that this really forces you, if you want to do it right, to take a step back and think about how your day-to-day activities impact the mission, impact the strategic objectives, and go from there. And I think that's really refreshing for people to do just in general, whether you're developing KPIs or not, because it does make you think about why we do what we do. And people who work at nonprofits, as well as those who partner, like us, who partner with them, we do this because we love the work, the outcomes of the missions.
Yeah.
That's it. And we all get so tied up in the weeds of the day-to-day that we forget about the mission and how amazing the organizations that we work with are.
And people have a very hard time because they are wearing a million hats and they have way too much on their plate. They just need to get that next email out. So they have a very hard time deciding, okay, today I'm going to stop and actually go through this KPI building process. But I would urge people to try it because it.
We only have a couple minutes left, and I think we talked a lot about motivation.
Yeah.
How do you, logistically, how do you take this on? Do we meet once a week? I mean, these are big topics. You can't do this in a week.
No.
But do you meet once a week over months or a couple days, or over every other day? How do you do this logistically?
I would suggest tacking it on to the front of your annual budgeting process. Mm-hmm. So work back from when your budgets are due to the board, and then when they're due to your department lead and due to leadership, and then give yourself a minimum of a month, but ideally 2 months. So it's like not unusual for it to be a 6-month process from the time of the department objective and KPI development to the time that the budget is actually finalized
Right.
and signed off on by the board.
Okay, excellent. That's helpful.
And that forces you to revisit on at least an annual basis, right? Because you're reevaluating before that next expenditure budget is
okay,
put
so
into
you're
place.
doing this annually.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we have like just a minute and a half left. I want to make sure this fits just right. So, who wants to leave us with closing thoughts?
I don't know what else to say.
Okay. I wish I had something easy to. You've seen this work at clients, right? You've seen transformation in clients. I mean, the process can work.
Yes,
You
definitely.
just have to devote attention to it.
I have seen it make those day-to-day tasks easier because then you have fewer interruptions from other departments or from leadership trying to push you in a million different
Excellent.
directions.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a really good point.
That's a good place. All right. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bravo. Well done.
Yeah,
That's
this is
wonderful.
fun.
Okay.
Thanks.
They are Anna Rhodes, Deputy Director of Analytics at Chapman, Cubine and Hussey, and also Brenna Holmes, Vice President of Digital at CCAH. The interview is sponsored by Network for Good, easy-to-use donor management and fundraising software for nonprofits. And thank you so much for being with Tony Martignetti nonprofit radio coverage of 18 NTC.